carbonate. Copper carbonate is a green powdery solid or green powder. I have some zinc carbonate. Zinc carbonate is a white powder. And finally, I have some sodium carbonate, also a white powder. So I'm going to put a bit of my carbonate into the test tube. Now, of course, because we're doing carbonate, we know that when the carbonates are heated, they decompose to produce the metal oxide and carbon dioxide. So to allow me to test for carbon dioxide, I have this test tube full of lime water. And I'm going to put my solid carbonate into this test tube. So I'm going to put just one spatula full, and I'm going to start with my copper carbonate. And I'm going to put a spatula full of copper carbonate in here. I'm going to stopper with my delivery tube, which is going to trap the gas and to allow me to bubble the gas into my lime water. And of course, because I'm heating, I've lit my Bunsen burner, and I'm going to use a test tube holder. So I'm going to gently heat the solid, and we're paying attention to what is happening in both the tubes. And as I gently heat my solid, you should see some bubbles coming into my lime water. And those bubbles are not because of any gas being produced right now. Those initial bubbles are because the air that is in the glass, the test tube, is being removed. But as you look, you can see my copper carbonate, it's beginning to turn color. And my lime water, which is in the test tube in my left hand. So this is where my lime water is over here. These fingers here, can everybody see? Very good. You can see my lime water is turning to a white precipitate.
Are you heating your fingers too?
No, I'm not.
I was wondering.
No, I'm not. No, I am not. Trust me, I've done this over. So as I heat my solid, I am seeing, you can see now my copper carbonate is no longer the pale green color, but rather, can we all see the copper carbonate? The copper carbonate is now a black solid. My lime water turned to a white precipitate, but as it continues to bubble, you may notice that the precipitate is now beginning to dissolve. So my white precipitate is dissolving to give me a colorless solution. And that is due to the fact that as the carbonate produces carbon dioxide, calcium carbonate is formed in the lime water. And as the lime water, we continue to bubble carbon dioxide into the lime water, the calcium carbonate dissolves to give the colorless calcium hydrogen carbonate. So I'm going to go through the same process now, but this time I'm going to use a spatula full of, and I'm going to use some zinc carbonate. Now remember, we said zinc carbonate is a white powder. So I'm going to put a spatula full, and I've put it into my test tube. Again, I'm going to connect my delivery tube. And I'm going to put my delivery tube into here. Remember, this is the test tube that I'm going to be heating, the test tube with the white solid. I have my test tube containing lime water. In this test tube, lime water, remember, is a colorless liquid. And I'm attaching my test tube holder. And again, we're going to heat gently. Now remember, we're moving, as we're heating, we're moving in and out of the flame. And the reason for that is to ensure that we're not heating a single spot, because that would break the test tube. So we're moving in and out, and again, note the initial bubbles due to the air leaving the tube. So we're having no changes in our lime water right now, but as we continue to heat, you can see the lime water is beginning to turn again to the white precipitate. Now with a little further heating, we see that the lime water is a white precipitate. I'm not going to heat it any further to drive off any more carbon dioxide for it to turn into a colorless solution. But what you should observe is my solid in here is now yellow. And we're going to look back at this solid shortly, because we're going to see if the solid changes color as it begins to cool. But while we're waiting for it to cool, we're going to do some sodium carbonate this time. And again, we're putting some fresh sodium carbonate, a spatula full again, into a test tube. We're going to put on our stopper on our delivery tube. We have our lime water in a second test tube. Again, we're heating the test tube that has the solid to observe what happens. Again, we're seeing the same bubbles as I start to heat, and that's because the air inside of the test tube that I'm heating is leaving. That is not yet an indication of any carbon dioxide. But as I continue to heat, you should observe that nothing is really happening in the test tube containing lime water. So we're going to heat it just a little bit longer. And as we can see, still no change in the lime water. So what we should observe is that our lime water retains the colorless appearance. Now this indicates to me that the sodium carbonate is not decomposing at all. So we're not forming the oxide, we're not having the thermal decomposition reaction. And what I want you to think about is why we're not having the thermal decomposition reaction with the sodium carbonate. Let's come back though to the one that we had before. Remember, this was the zinc carbonate that we were heating before. And if you look, your zinc carbonate, you're going to see that it's no longer yellow. So the product that we get from the thermal decomposition zinc carbonate is yellow when hot and white when cool. What do you think that solid is?